I'm joined now by Dan McDermott from thechartguys.com. Dan, how are you doing today?
Good, glad to be back. How are you, James?
Yeah, I'm great as well. Markets haven't really done anything much for me lately, and cannabis investors are uniformly adopting the Chicken Little posture of the sky is falling. What is going on in our universe, Dan, from where you sit?
Well, the S&P 500 is in a tightening range on the weekly time frame, and depending how it breaks is going to determine the direction for the end of the year, in my opinion. So if it's a bear break, we'll lose the weekly uptrend for the first time since the December bottom, which is 10 months ago. So that would be notable. And if we hold it, then everything's just fine as far as I'm concerned. You know, negative headlines, completely disregarding them, because as long as we're in a weekly uptrend in the S&P 500, that's all that I personally care about. As far as the MJ sector goes, we have all the fear headlines and all the vaping crisis. And I was actually visiting back home in Massachusetts just as that was starting to go through. So I went to a dispensary, I talked to them and was asking what was up. And they were certainly not pleased with the broad scope ban that they saw up in Massachusetts. And we are getting data now of, it's the black market THC cartridges where the issues are coming up and the legal ones being tested appear to be all right. So aside from that, we're really just trying to weather that storm. A little bit of bullish news for me personally that came out yesterday was, I forget her name off the top of my head, maybe Laura Ingraham on Twitter. She's a Fox News anchor or something on Fox News. But she put out a tweet saying that she's hearing rumors that Mitch McConnell is looking to push through the SAFE Act, and she was not happy with it at all. And that's the first legitimate source, aside from sector bulls, that I've seen mention that that's a possibility. So that, for me, holds much more weight than, a sector bull who might be some emotional opinions on what they hope is going to happen. But she was very against it. But the fact that she was saying she had heard that rumor makes it more legitimate to me.
And what would be Mitch McConnell's motivation for hurrying that through? Is his home state a big cannabis state?
It is a big industrial hemp state, Kentucky. So that is a potential. And they did in the House when it was voting through, they did add some amendments to it to potentially sweeten the deal for his state. I don't know specifically what they were, but I know that they were targeting him essentially to try and get him on board. In my opinion, if it's brought before the Senate for a vote, it's as good as a pass because they only need a simple majority. And if Mitch is going to vote on it, then they're going to pass it pretty much, is my opinion.
And so what is the time frame soonest that could happen in?
I don't know. The only other person that I've heard with rumors about it was from Todd Harrison, who is on Twitter, and he's a fundamental bull in the sector. And he said that one of his sources, taken with a large grain of salt, was looking for it to be voted on before Thanksgiving. So when I read that, I took it with a huge grain of salt and said, yeah, that'd be great, but I don't believe it. And now that I got this other tweet from Laura, that is perhaps adding a little validity to me.
Yeah, Todd's a regular guest on our show, and we haven't talked about that recently, but that's you've given me good cause to give him a call. Okay, so on the 8th, yesterday, the S&P opened much lower than it closed at on on Monday. And this morning, it was characterized by a open much higher than where it closed at yesterday. But it seems like the market's open and closing is become a lot more volatile. And is that related to any specific fundamental geopolitical element, or is that just a sign of the volatility that is characterizing markets globally with all of the uncertainty going on?
Well, it'll certainly be pointed to by everybody as the headlines. In my opinion, it's technically doing what I would expect it to do in the most likely scenario. So every day I look, what's the most likely scenario? And I'm looking for the S&P 500 to give us a little daily higher low compared to the low of last week. And so when we come on in the morning and I see a positive China trade war headline that is leading to a higher open, it might be surprising to a lot of people, but I'm expecting that little daily higher low. It's also important to note that when you're in a tightening range, the shorter term timeframes get more choppy. So if we're in a tightening weekly range, the hourly time frame is going to be really choppy. And that's somewhat what we're seeing going on right now. So to be honest, nothing out of the price action has really surprised me in a big way. but it's just the headlines that are the reason for this price action taking place.
Okay, so where have your profitable trades happened in the last little while?
Oh, very quick day trades. So yesterday I traded the biotech sector bearish. I was in the trade for maybe 20 minutes at most. I traded SPXL, which is an S&P 500 leveraged bull. I flipped that. I was in it for maybe 10 minutes. So just small little base hit day makers, and certainly holding nothing overnight because of these headlines and these weak closes, higher open, and vice versa. So until we get some clarity on the weekly time frame, I'm not going to be looking to do anything but day trade. And then once that clarity comes, then I'll be considering perhaps some midterm swing trades.
Right. Okay, great. Dan, well, so what about the cannabis space? Has there been any opportunities in there for you as a day trader or a swing trader?
There's been an oversold bounce, and I love oversold bounces. It's just one of my edges as a trader. I don't suggest newer traders try it because it's playing counter the trend, but we had that oversold bounce from last week, and there were solid gains there. I mean, I don't have the percentages off the top of my head, but I'd say pretty much if you're looking at Canadian and USMJ sector, everybody went about 15 to 30%. So as long as you're in and out quick, we knew we were just going to set a daily lower high on those bounces because we're in a daily downtrend. Right now, there's a base of support being established, and the bulls are doing their darndest to change the daily trend with a little higher low and higher high. And that's what we're watching on CGC and the other major names right now. If that happens, it could provide some short-term relief. As far as bigger picture for the sector as a whole, it, in my opinion, will rely on the SAFE Act, obviously affecting the U.S. space more. But if that SAFE Act, if we start getting more and more word that it will be voted on, I think we're going to start to see a lot of relief in the sector as some bulls try and position themselves for that potential passing.
Right. All right, Dan, well, let's go to the charts.
So not many charts to look at today. We'll start with the S&P 500. This is the weekly tightening range that I was talking about, where we have our resistance, we have our low, we have our double top, and now we're looking at a higher low. So on the big pullback just here at the end of September, I was anticipating that a higher low would form compared to the August lows, because the most likely scenario is to see tightening ranges when we see spikes in volatility, unless things certainly unhinge and we see huge bear volume and a huge bear follow through. So in the end, we have currently held that level for now. So this is the tightening weekly range that we're going to be watching into the end of the year. If we get a bear break, we lose the weekly uptrend from the December bounce. And if we get a bull break, we get a new all-time high. So there's obviously a very big difference between those two different scenarios. Also, the daily time frame. So here's what we're talking about, where we saw the dump. We anticipated that the August lows would hold. They initially did. But then on the bounce, we were just looking for a daily lower high to form compared to where we came from. So we started to see a little bit of weakness back on Monday. Overnight, bearish news articles come out. They just followed through with what we anticipated was the most likely scenario of a daily lower high being set. And now we're looking at a higher low to be set. Why are we looking for a higher low rather than just a straight drop? Because of the size of the bounce. So the size of the bounce here on the S&P 500 was significant enough that we created space of about 3.5%, almost 4%. So we're going to look for a pullback, a higher low to be established, and a tightening daily range, which is what is shaping up at this point. To be more confident, I just want to see a break for SPY to get over the high of yesterday, and then we're going to look for this range to tighten up. And once we get a break of the tight daily range, that's going to dictate what we watch on the weekly range. If the daily range breaks bearish, odds of losing the weekly uptrend will increase. If it breaks bullish, odds of remaining in this tightening weekly pattern for pretty much through October will increase. So tightening ranges, waiting for breaks, and being very patient before we look at anything other than day trades. I need to see breaks of these ranges for a bit more clarity on direction. As far as the MJ space goes, here's CGC with its low. Again, we had that great bounce. It was a 16% bounce on CGC. Some of the smaller cap names got more significant bounces, but we hit our low, the high of the bounce, held our low. So here's our higher low forming, and the bulls have to break 23.75 to change that daily trend for the first time in a while and try and shift that momentum back to the bulls a bit. And currently I've made 2 trades this week in the MJ space, and the lesson for me has been don't trust bull breaks, because these bull breaks that we get on shorter term timeframes are not getting any follow through. Case in point, today CGC broke that high of yesterday real early, 2309, but only got 8 cents of follow through, not convincing at all, and still in its own tightening daily range. So we're going to get a lot more clarity for the broader market as a whole before the end of the year, anticipating a break probably later October, early November, and that could potentially have some broader implications on all the sectors in the market, with the MJ sector included.
All right, Dan, great contribution as usual. We'll have you back soon. Thanks for joining me today.
You got it.